The first question is to Dr. Petar Yankov. How do you assure sustainability of the main conservation activities in PODA protected areas?
Thank you very much for this question. Well, it's not an easy one, but I will try to answer as specifically as possible. First of all, I think that our experience shows that one of the best preconditions for creating sustainability is to work as organization. I'm saying this because in many cases people think that individually being a small group but not official NGO or other body can ensure sustainability. I think this is not possible. In our case, this is BSPB, which is providing, how to say, this solid basis to create sustainability on many levels and by many people. Of course, first, which is coming on our, in our case, are the projects. And this is really a problem, as project-based sustainability is really not a sustainability. But nevertheless, in our case, in Bulgaria, where, as I mentioned, there is no civil society, there is not real well operating and, how to say, environmentally sensitive business, we cannot expect much. The other, as the question is concrete, specifically for PODA Center, what we do specifically at PODA Center, we have several, we try all the time to develop different approaches, but what is working for the moment is small shop, which is selling goods and services. We have entrance fee, which is not a big one, but still some income. The services we offer are different, from providing photographic hides under some rent, or photographic equipment, things like that. Quite a few of our income is coming from donations. Donations which are got by our visitors or people which are working with us, but also donations which we raise through BSPB as donation campaigns. We had quite successful Christmas donation campaign, which actually funded a renovation of the platforms and artificial islands for different birds at PODA this year, I mean. Another way we are trying to get our sustainability is partnerships, or specifically speaking, we have partnership contracts with some small guest houses around PODA. Under these contracts, we are turning some of our visitors which are seeking for accommodation to these small guest houses, and they're giving us some percentage of their of these tourists. But what is the most important, which we found, is it's very difficult to find the English word, but working, let's say, working properly, working with heart. This is something which we found out is very important to be supported and sponsored. We really try to work with all of our heart. People are feeling this, they see this. We had recently very interesting case when
you should be very short.
Okay, this is one of the points, but also what I want to mention is to think also in advance and to seek for long-term mechanisms for sustainability. For the moment, for us, this is to work with the state and local institutions, as we hope soon Bulgaria will be better with regards to understanding the value of nature conservation by the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Petar. The next question is to Jerry, to Albania. What bird species breed at Narta Vjosa? Number of bird species compared between 2016 and 2020.
Just to clarify, number of breeding pairs, I was referring, not birds. For the breeding birds.
Okay.
Species.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I just opened actually the report. I'd like to emphasize that this study done on 2020 was a complementary study for the breeding birds study that we did in 2016. And according to the data, we haven't published yet the report. According to the data, there are less species compared to 2016. Even though for some species population, we have seen an increase, and especially I'm talking here about the pied avocet, for example, which have around 500 breeding pairs counted, and it's the hugest in Albania. Meanwhile, also we have seen an increase of Glarola pratincola. But on the other hand, we have seen some decrease of numbers in Sterna hirunda, for example. And they are, according to the report, there are 40 species breeding in the area. Shortly, 20 they are possible breeders, and 17 probable. That's shortly, but I can share you the data on email, maybe.
Is it known how many species of dragonflies can live in brackish water?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yes, it is known, but it really depends of the salinity level of the fresh water you consider. The higher the salinity level will be, the fewer species you will encounter. So in the case of the range of tolerance of Lestes macrosigma, it can be only 2-3 species when the salinity level is really high. I mean something like 14-15 grams per liter. And if the salinity is not so strong, you can have a dozen species. But beside that, beside the number of species, because when we are talking about biodiversity, sorry for that moment, where we are talking about biodiversity, species richness is important, but I mean that all those species are really common, except Lestes macrosigma or Lestes barbaris, and we do not have to target especially a high number of species. We have to target the specificity of this species because it has a bad conservation status, and it really deserves some conservation efforts. I mean, for sure you will have more species if your freshwater is fresher, if your hydro period is more permanent, but you will have only common species. So, of course, in saline areas, if there are no freshwaters around, you can manage to get permanent and freshwaters to have a nice species richness. But species, Lestes macrosigma, which is in a bad conservation status, really deserves conservation efforts, really targeting that species. I hope it answers the question.
Yeah, thank you, Philip.
Welcome.
Next question is to Marcia. What were the perceptions of locals and their engagement in this project?
Well, we didn't start with the locals. We knew that it was going to be a challenge. So we start in Lisbon because the people are more open-minded, and it went really well in the organic supermarkets. In the locals, we are starting now in the local market, and when the people taste, they really love it, and they want to try more. But the old people have this difficult to see salinas in a different perspective. They have this idea of the salinas working and producing salt. If they are not producing salt, they are no longer useful. And they see the plants that grow native like weeds. So we need to construct a new idea of the salinas. And I think this would take some time, but I'm very happy to be on the local market and see the locals trying and loving the plants that we are producing. Yeah.
Thank you, Marcia. The next question is to Graziano. How to make seagrass transplantation sustainable after the project? This expensive action and require a lot of people and manual work. Do you have new techniques to make the process cheaper and faster?
Yeah. Well, yes, thank you for the question. Actually, the techniques at the beginning, actually it needs a lot of funds, a lot of people. So the initial effort is big. But the previous project proved that on long term, seagrass transplantation is self-sustainable, since actually the species start to grow, start to actually produce seeds. And the seagrass meadows by itself, you don't have to every year after the project, every year to transplant. And let's say after 3-4 years, the seagrass meadows increase by itself the area coverage, thanks to the production of seeds and also by growing with new rhizomes. It depends on the species. Some species produce a lot of seeds, like Ruppia, a really huge amount. Other species produce less seeds, but they grow a little bit more with the rhizome. So you need actually this effort at the beginning, funds and people. It is supposed to last at least, say, 4 years of transplant. And after that, if the conditions, of course, are good for the whole lagoon, the seagrass meadows spreads by itself. So it's self-sustainable on long term, and it improves the habitat and the whole environment. A lot of benefits, a lot of real benefits for the whole brackish lagoon.
Thank you a lot, Graziano. The next question is to Melpo. Those islets surrounded by water ditches, are these effective to keep away predators? How wide and deep are ditches? The question is from Mitko Popov from Green Balkans. Your microphone.
Yes. So thanks for the question. I will need to check the dimensions because my memory is not so good, and it's been over 10 years now, but I can check it and come back to you on that. It is effective when the water levels are high enough for foxes. Ideally, for something to be so efficient, you need to do anti-fox fences. But given the budget that we had, this was considered as a better option at that time.
And the question is there any issue with the nest predation by terrestrial predator in Narta? And if yes, how this threat is addressed? Jerry can answer this question.
Yeah. Thank you, Diana, and thank you about the question. Well, I mentioned a bit in my presentation, but we have seen that during the implementation of this conservation action toward the flamingo dike that we were working, we have seen that predators or other species were causing a disturbance in that dike, such as, for example, feral dogs, livestock, but also we have noticed that the area there, when flamingos potentially breed or start breeding, we have seen the presence of the jackal and the beach marten, Martes foina. So, and due to this, we put some fences which need to be also maintained this year, and but they need some further studies to follow up on this section also.
Thank you, Jerry. And there is one question to Bridget. The question is, do you have any written manual for building and maintaining flamingos artificial islands, and can you share it?
I'm not sure. I would like to ask to the flamingo expert at Torrevella whether they do have such a manual. So I will look for it, but I don't know of any, that's for sure.
Thank you, Bridget. And there is another question to Mitko. Is the visitor center of Pomoria well managed now since left by the Green Balkans, and why you didn't keep it longer?
Thank you for the question. Well, we didn't keep it longer because the municipality didn't want to allow us to keep it longer. And well, the main issue, I think, was a long-lasting conflict because of our opposing as an NGO to plans for further construction around the lake. And well, some of the disruptions of the hydrological regime are actually caused by wrong decisions by the municipality, and we are regularly addressing that and criticizing them for that. So I guess this was the main reason. So the political situation was that the local municipality was part of the governing party at that time, and I think it was advertised that the plan was to make a large investment into the visitor center for a full renovation, expecting to get more projects, I guess, within the operational programs. But since there were some political changes in recent years after that happened, in the last year especially, I haven't seen any major renovations. Well, concerning if it is managed well, I wouldn't say there is a big difference. Now it is part of the History Museum, which is also managing the Salt Museum, and the Visitor Center and the Salt Museum are very close to each other. So at least I assume that there are not any obstacles created by the staff of the Salt Museum for visitors, and maybe they are now encouraged more to visit the visitor center. But as I have seen, in terms of staff, that was a major problem for the History Museum, because they don't have any experts on the topic of nature, with being fully specialized on history as a historical museum. And as I see, we were proposing to organize training and to provide advice on equipment and on whatever is needed, but they never asked us to provide that. So this is in general how it is going with the visitor center. Now it is still open, as I see, but yeah, I guess that the experience for the visitors is not so great. Actually, there was quite a good interest in the recent months because of the higher number of flamingos that were wintering next to the in Pomoria Lake and very close to the visitor center.
There is one question to Juan. Do you have reference on how Simonide is used for human consumption, and in case share it? I'm not sure that I read correctly this.
Sorry, I were copying the link.
Yeah, I can copy this question to you.
All right. Yes, we have working with the University of Cantabria, the Instituto Hidráulica Ambiental of Cantabria, and we signed an agreement 2 years ago they offer us some plants, and we transplant in our experimental cultivation plants. So they are donate. They donate in the first step of the project the first plants, and from 2 years ago we are using just our own seeds and our own plants.
Yes, and the first question.
Yes, the Cimolocea, I haven't reference. I have some reference of Thalassia from Venezuela, Filiforme, and Enalus acoroides, but we also use Rupia maritima, that in this morning having partners having talking about it to make a kind of sea honey, but not Cimolocea.
If there are more questions, don't hesitate to address them. And because we have just 5 minutes left, with Diana and Jerry, we would like to make 2 suggestions. I think there is no doubt that such events of sharing experience, especially from country to country and region to region, are very valuable for our future work. And first suggestion is to set a mailing list with all the participants so that you can regularly exchange news, reports, methodologies, questions, and collaborate closer.